Here's something that'll make you question every argument you've had in the last 6 months. The reason you're more irritable, more confrontational, more likely to snap at people might not be stress, hormones, or your personality. It might be because you haven't seen enough sun. And I'm not talking about some hippie wellness theory. I'm talking about hard science that reveals how a simple vitamin deficiency is quietly rewiring your brain for aggression. You think vitamin D is just about bone health? Think again, it's about behavioral control. And the implications are so disturbing that once you understand this, you'll never look at seasonal depression, prison violence, or even your own mood swings the same way again. Welcome to the dark side of the sunshine vitamin, where biology meets psychology, and where the difference between peace and violence might just be a matter of latitude. Let me start with something that should terrify you. Researchers studied violence rates in prisons and found something bizarre. Assaults spike during winter months when inmates get the least natural light. But here's where it gets really dark. When they installed full-spectrum lighting that mimics sunlight, aggressive incidents dropped by 30%. 30%. We're talking about controlling human violence with light bulbs. But it gets worse. Vitamin D doesn't just affect your mood. It directly regulates the neurotransmitters responsible for impulse control. When your levels drop, your brain's ability to pause before reacting starts to deteriorate. You become chemically predisposed to fight-or-flight responses. Your threshold for anger lowers. Your patience evaporates. You're not just sad, you're weaponized. And here's the kicker, this isn't some rare deficiency. 80% of people living in northern climates are walking around with suboptimal vitamin D levels during winter months, which means 4 out of 5 people you interact with from November to March are operating with compromised impulse control, including you. Think about your worst arguments, your most regrettable confrontations, the times you snapped at someone and couldn't understand why. Now think about when they happened. I'll bet you a month of sunshine that most of them occurred during the darker months of the year. The research on seasonal violence patterns is absolutely chilling. Murder rates peak in winter across virtually every northern city studied. Domestic violence calls surge, road rage incidents multiply, suicide rates skyrocket. We've been treating these as separate social problems, but they're all symptoms of the same biological crisis. Mass vitamin D deficiency creating mass behavioral instability. But here's what really blew my mind. When researchers mapped global conflict patterns against sunlight exposure, they found something remarkable. Mediterranean cultures, with their year-round sun exposure, developed entirely different approaches to conflict resolution than Northern European cultures. The Greeks invented democracy and philosophical debate. The Scandinavians invented berserkers and blood feuds. Coincidence? Not when you understand the neurochemistry. Vitamin D regulates serotonin production, your brain's natural mood stabilizer. When levels drop, serotonin plummets, and your brain starts operating in survival mode. Everything becomes a threat. Every disagreement becomes a battle. Every social interaction becomes potentially explosive. And modern life has made this infinitely worse. We spend 90% of our time indoors under artificial lighting that provides zero vitamin D synthesis. We commute in enclosed vehicles, work in windowless offices, exercise in underground gyms. We've created a lifestyle that guarantees deficiency, and then we wonder why everyone seems angrier, more aggressive, more ready to explode. Here's your uncomfortable mirror moment. That coworker who drives you crazy? That family member who pushes all your buttons? That stranger who cut you off in traffic? What if the problem isn't their personality? What if it's their biochemistry? What if they're not choosing to be difficult? What if their brain is literally malfunctioning due to solar deprivation? And here's the scariest part, what if you're that person to someone else? The evolutionary logic is actually brilliant and terrifying. Our ancestors needed to be more aggressive during winter months to compete for scarce resources. The shortened days triggered hormonal changes that made them more territorial, more confrontational, more willing to fight for survival. But we're no longer hunter-gatherers facing actual scarcity, we're office workers facing artificial scarcity of sunlight, and our brains can't tell the difference. So your winter depression isn't just sadness, it's your nervous system preparing for war. But here's where this gets practical and immediately actionable. Smart negotiators already know this secret. They schedule difficult conversations for late morning when natural light exposure is highest. They position themselves near windows during important meetings. They take walking meetings outdoors whenever possible. They're literally using photons as psychological leverage. You can biohack your own aggression levels starting today. Get 20 minutes of direct sunlight exposure before any important conversation. If you live somewhere that doesn't cooperate with this plan, invest in a light therapy device, the same ones used to treat seasonal affective disorder. Your relationships will thank you. Here's your practical tool. Start tracking your mood and conflict patterns against your light exposure. For 2 weeks, note every time you feel irritable, every time you snap at someone, every time you feel that familiar surge of aggression. Then note how much natural light you got that day. You'll start to see a pattern that will fundamentally change how you manage your emotional state. But the bigger revelation is this: if something as simple as sunlight exposure can regulate human aggression on a mass scale, what does that tell us about free will? About personal responsibility? About the nature of human conflict itself? Maybe the reason you had that fight with your partner wasn't because you're incompatible. Maybe it's because you both haven't seen enough sun. Maybe the reason your team is more difficult to manage in January isn't because they're lazy. Maybe it's because their brains are chemically primed for conflict. The next time someone seems unreasonably aggressive, unreasonably irritable, unreasonably difficult to deal with, ask yourself, when was the last time they saw the sun? And more importantly, when was the last time you did? Because if this changed how you think about human behavior, if it made you look at seasonal patterns differently, if it made you realize that biology is destiny more than we'd like to admit, then you're ready for more insights that challenge everything you think you know about human nature. Subscribe, not just for the content, but for the perspective shift. Because once you see how much of human behavior is driven by factors we don't even recognize, you can't unsee it. And that awareness? That's the first step toward actually controlling the variables that control you. The sun doesn't just give you vitamin D, it gives you the biochemical foundation for civilization itself. Make sure you're getting enough of both.